everyone. Welcome to Anapest scanning. This is the meter of fire, and it's really got an amazing potential, this meter. It took me a long time to get back to it, but wow, I really now appreciate it so much. So I'm going to be scanning the seed poems to give us an idea of how the scansion works. Okay, so starting off with this beautiful little poem by Sarah Teasdale. It's very regular anapestic. So if we use the three-step method, as you may know, if you've worked with a three-step scansion method before, with this three-step method, you don't know ahead of time really what meter it is. So this would work even if you don't know if it's Anapest or not. Whatever, you wouldn't even know what the meter is, you hopefully would still be able to figure it out inductively, deductively through the three-step process. So you start off with wands. Where are the strong beats? I would live in your love as the sea grasses live in the sea. So definitely one on live, right? I would live in your love as the sea grasses. Both of those are kind of stressed, aren't they? Live in the sea. I would live in your love as the sea grasses live in the sea. Actually, saying it again, maybe that grasses is a little bit less of one. So if it's not a full wand, we can just leave it off. At this stage, we're only scanning the full wands. So we'll take that one away. Okay. Borne up by each wave as it passes. So clearly there's one on up. You might hear one on born, but I'm going to think that born is kind of like grass. It's a little bit less. So I'm going to leave that for now. Borne up by each wave. Wave gets one for sure, right? As it passes, drawn down by each wave that recedes. So again, maybe drawn, maybe born, get something, but not a strong one, just maybe a half wand, or this is how we use a half wand, this is how we do a full wand, this is how we do a cup or unstressed syllable. In case you aren't familiar with these, you can look at the top of the spell book and you see a little glossary. So I would empty my soul of the dreams that have gathered in me. This one's quite straightforward. I would empty my soul of the dreams that have gathered in me. I would beat with your heart as it beats. I would follow your soul as it leads. Okay, so you might want to just pause, look at these, and say it aloud to yourself. And notice if you have any questions, feel free to ask me in the meter questions for Annie in the spiral. And under portals, you'll find a portal called Meter Questions for Annie. You can always ask me any meter question there. If you understand or hear these as the wands, then let's move forward. So the step 2 is we put in the cups on all the other syllables, unless we get to a syllable that really feels a lot stronger than a cup. Then we do have the option to put a half wand there. So I kind of love to do that because for a moment like this, it shows you how beautiful that moment is. And I even love how visually it looks like the grasses when I used to go kayaking, swaying back and forth around the kayak. So it's kind of nice to acknowledge the fact that she's given a little extra stress there. But you don't have to. If you find that confusing or you don't really hear it as very stressed, you could just put a cup there. They're both correct. When it comes to half wands versus wands, you can't really go wrong. It's just a question of marking the way you hear it to best enjoy the poem and share your understanding of the poem. Okay, so step 3 is look for patterns and put in the edges. This is an edge. It's otherwise known as a foot break, foot boundary, edge. These are my own words for these things. Wands, cups, edges are my own words, and I love them, and they're very handy, so I share them with you freely. I would live. So let's look at this pattern. Cup, cup, wand, cup, cup, wand, cup, cup, wand. Clearly, this is a repeating pattern. So we put in the edges there. The half wand counts as a cup for purposes of the foot. It is still anapasts. So we see that this first line, now we understand it is 4 anapasts, maybe one of them with a half wand in it, but they're all anapasts. And so we can see clearly that this is a poem in anapestic meter. And since there are 4, we call it anapestic tetrameter. And then we can go to the next one, put in the cups, and see it should basically match. You could put a half wand here or a cup. Either one is fine over the drawn. So here we go again. Okay, cup wand. Okay, that doesn't fit the pattern. So if that's confusing, let's just leave it. Cup wand, cup, cup wand, cup, cup wand, cup wand, cup, cup wand, cup, cup wand. So at the end, we have 2 very strong cup, cup wands. So we can start at the end, putting in the edges if we want. You can do the edges from the beginning or the end, and sometimes it's easier to see what's going on if you start at the end. Clearly, these are both anapasts, leaving it to seem as if this is also going to be an anapestic line, which we would expect since the poem starts out anapestic. So if we know it's anapestic, we can look for other anapasts. Here we can put the edges around these 2 anapasts, and then we can see, so you see, you don't even have to decide what to do about the other parts. You can just say, okay, these 2 are clearly anapasts, so I'm going to put the edges to mark those as anapasts, just like these. And when you do that, you end up seeing, these are both iambic. And if you look in the spell book, you'll see a list of variations at the bottom of the spell book section for anapasts. And you'll see that iambs are a common typical variation within anapestic poetry. So if you're writing your own poems in anapest, maybe you don't want to start right off with iambs. You probably want to just stick with lines like this that are straight anapestic all the way. But if you get more comfortable with it, you might want to start using variations the way Teasdale does here. So she's using iambs. And because iambs and anapests are both rising feet, they're similar in the sense they both move from cups to wands, increasing the emphasis. So they're called rising feet. And as rising feet, they play very easily together, and it's common to see them varying, substituting for each other. Anywhere that you want in a line, you could put in an iamb and in an anapestic poem, and people will understand it because it's all rising. So bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum. It just all flows together. So this next line, I would empty my soul. Let's see. I would empty my soul. So we put the wands in already. So putting in the cups, you can see that this one is going to be just straightforward anapest again, without any variations at all, just like the first line. And then the last line, the same, except there's more of them, right? I would beat with your heart as it beats. I believe this one is longer. Maybe you could put a half wand on the your if you want, but otherwise it's completely regular anapestic. So the only difference is that these lines all are 4, so they're tetrameters, anapestic tetrameters, and this last one is 6. So that's the big difference. Common to, if you're going to do a big variation like that, to do it at the end of a poem. So it's a wonderful anapestic poem. I love the way these 2 moments really allow the meter to sway a little bit by putting more emphasis on these 2 syllables, grass and drawn, and maybe born as well. Sometimes I like to scan it with a half wand there just to emphasize that, but either way is correct, a half wand or a cup. as long as you're not giving it, I don't know, some people might want to give it a full one, but I don't think so. I think the up is stronger. When you're scanning, usually the expected position gets a little more emphasis just because people expect it. So even if born up seemed equal, the up would get a little more because people expect a wand there and they're going to hit it a little harder. So I love the way she uses the meter here to kind of convey the motion of of the um, the grasses in the water. So beautiful. So okay, so that's quite straightforward. You scan it basically using the same tools you use for any other meter. If this is your first month in the spiral, then I want to make sure you do watch the meter initiation videos, which will tell you all about the 3-step method and everything else. In fact, you might want to stop and do that. Okay, so here we go forward into the. Okay, so this is one of mine. I chose this meter for this poem because I feel that this is Anapestics are the meter of the will, and this was a poem where I wanted the will to be considered very sacred, the will of the person who is pregnant and choosing to have the abortion, and to honor that. Um, Patriarchal religion is all about oppressing or controlling other people's wills. I'm not interested in that, and I'm a goddess worshiper. So I wrote my abortion poem in the meter of the will. So we can see that the meter here, and I turn your blood back to the earth. I am life, you are death, and we kiss through the fire that is my freedom's birth. By the womb of our love's endlessness, as you turn my blood back to the earth, I am death, you are life, and we kiss till we move through the deep, giving forth to the web of our love woven bliss through the fire that is our freedom's birth. If we mark the wands, we could maybe put a half wand there. Clearly it's anapestic. In this case, anapestic trimeter, and very regular really in the anapes. Oh, sorry, sometimes I forget to do the 3 steps in order. I recommend doing them in order normally because when you get to tricky moments, it's really a good habit to have to put the wands first, then the cups, then the edges. Why? Because it allows you to let the meter emerge naturally rather than imposing on it. Imposing on things is a way to sometimes obscure the reality. I am life, you are death. Sometimes when I'm reading it aloud, I stress the you like that. And that would be, I think, a choice that you could make in scanning if you want to give the you some emphasis. And same with free, freedom's birth. This is really a cretic substitution, right? In the anapestic meter, because free does need to get some kind of a stress. So I would actually even give free a full wand here. Freedom's birth. I've never scanned this poem before. By the womb of our love's endlessness. So again, I think this is also sort of a cretic, right? By the womb of our love's endlessness. It's interesting, endlessness and freedom's birth both feel more like critics because they have more emphasis on the first syllable. And having just gone through a month of critics, I'm very aware of critics as a meter of the dark goddess, the sublime power that marries death and life, which is really exactly what this poem is about. I wrote it before Autumn Newman suggested that we do something with critics, so I wasn't even conscious I had critics in crucial moments in this poem, but I see them now. There they are. As you turn my blood back to the earth. Okay, so it's a little bit different here. As you turn my blood back. I think these both have to be ones. Here we have, as you turn my blood back to the earth. My blood back is what we call a Bacchic foot, the rising foot with two wands, cup wand, wand, and it's definitely a totally acceptable variation in Anapestic meter, and it does create more of an emphasis. It slows things down, kind of like a spondy would do in iambic poem. I am death, you are life, and we kiss. This is a very regular Anapestic line. And we kiss. Sorry, these should be cups. Till we move through the deep. Ah, here's another of those Cretic feet, right? Interesting. And so is this. And when I'm reading this aloud, I often read it in a kind of slow chant at the end here. You may have heard when I just read it, till we move through the deep, giving forth to the web of our love, woven bliss. So interestingly enough, through the fire, that is our freedom's birth. This entire last stanza were the baby and the mother. And like Lucille Clifton, I choose the word baby because I don't think there's any, for me, as a person who believes abortion is a sacred spiritual aspect of the life-giving power of we who give birth, to me, there is no need to obscure the fact that this may feel like a baby. When I had an abortion, it did feel like a baby in a certain way, but it also felt like a part of my body. But like Lucille Clifton in her Lost Baby poem, I think of it as baby in this poem. So I feel like this is the mother and the baby talking both. And the baby's talking in italics. Um, the mother is talking not in italics. But when they come together at the ending here, interspersing the italics and the not italics, the poem becomes more Cretic, very heavily Cretic, with a lot of Cretic substitutions. So now that we've spent a month on Cretics, I understand even more how appropriate that is, even though I did not do that consciously. So once again, meter is an amazing mystery to me, the way it allows us to speak through the body of the poem, speaking things we may not even consciously understand. Okay, so now for something completely different. Here is Paul Revere's Ride, an excerpt from that very important poem that helped to shape the mythology of the beginning of the United States. And Longfellow really stands out as a poet who used meters other than the iambic meter. It's surprising how few people copied him. He was actually, I sometimes think of him as a poetess. I once started writing an article called Longfellow as a Poetess because he used meters in the way that the popular women poets of his time in the 19th century used meters of all types. It was really the more high class elite poets who used iambic primarily. The women who were often not as educated, not as literate, were more coming out of the oral tradition of poetry. They used other meters besides iambic, and Longfellow also used other meters. So he was coming out of a more popular tradition. He used trochees, dactyls, and anapes all extremely eloquently. So here's a little section. We won't scan the whole thing. I'm just going to read it aloud, and by now you should be attuned enough to anapestic meter that you can probably hear it pretty well, and I'll emphasize it as well. And when I hit something that seems it needs to be marked, I will mark it. Then he climbed the tower of the Old North Church. Okay, so the first foot's an anapest, right? Then he climbed, and the tower is actually I am. And then here, he's got something very unusual actually here. It's called a fourth paean. It's a 4-syllable foot, which you don't see very often, but it fits well into the Anapestic framework because, like the iamb, it's also a rising foot. So it creates a little more excitement and variation here. Then he climbed the tower of the Old North Church. The whole poem has been Anapestic. This is from the middle of it, and suddenly we've got the iamb and then the fourth paean, P-A-E-A-N, that's spelled. You'll also see it listed in your variation list in the spell book. Fourth paean. So you'll see the suddenly switching between 2 and 4 syllables in the middle of the Anapestic line creates the sense of excitement. And you could even say maybe the effort of climbing how high the tower is and then having to go up all those steps. It's kind of a kinetic experience for the reader to get in the place of the climbing of the steps. By the wood and stairs with stealthy tread. He's got quite a few iambs in here. The first foot is an anapest. Then here's iamb. This is not as regular as I remembered. By the wood and stairs with stealthy tread. Okay, his stealthy tread is in iambs. To the belfry chamber overhead. To the belfry chamber overhead. So maybe you can hear the first foot's an anapest, the rest are iambs. To the belfry chamber overhead. These are all 2-syllable feet. And startled the pigeons from their perch. And startled the pigeon. I'm just going to put the line breaks at the edges in here. Sometimes I do that when I'm scanning quickly. We know that they're all going to be either anapests or iambs pretty much, except this was a real unusual variation. But basically, they're going to be iambs or anapests. So if you just put, when you're really scanning quickly, if you just put the edges, you kind of get the idea, right? They're all rising feet. Startled the pigeons from their perch, so you get a sense, okay, this is the only anapest, it's the only one with 3 syllables. The others are all iambs. On the somber rafters that round him made, on the somber rafters that round him made. Okay, so here this line has 2 anapests. Turns that round. The others are iambs. Masses and moving shapes of shade. Okay, here we have a trochee. It's you may think, why is this not a dactyl? Why don't we include this into the foot, the and? But we don't, because if you did that, the whole line would become a falling line, and this is a rising meter, so we want to respect that. And moving shapes of shade. So it's actually 3 iambs preceded by a trochee. So there's a lot of iambs in this part of the poem. I think of it as an anapestic poem. I'd have to go back and look at the beginning. Listen, my children, and you shall hear of the midnight ride of Paul Revere. I'm pretty sure that he's got more than half anapests throughout the poem, but it's right on the edge, so you might want to scan it. If you had to label it, you might want to call it mixed anapestic and iambic. The trembling lad or steep and tall, there are a lot of iambs here. For an iambic poem of the time, it has a lot of anapests, so you would not call it just iambic, but you might want to call it a mixture of anapestic and iambic. I'll have, I think it's important to look at the beginning of the poem because the beginning sets the tone. To the highest window in the wall, and get more of a sense where he paused to listen. Okay, here's several anapests in a row where he paused to listen and look. Where he paused to, no, it's not, sorry, whoops. Where he paused to listen and look down. Where he paused, that's definitely an anapest. To listen and look down. Where he paused to listen and look down. Okay, beautiful line, isn't it? To listen and look down. So really, the point that this makes is that it is hard to find anapestic poems. That's one reason I put 2 of my own in here instead of, I mean, it's hard to find them. I thought this was one, but I see it's got a lot of iambs in it, so I don't know. And the moonlight flowing over all A lot of them start with anapasts and then end up in iambs. So yeah, okay, lots of iambs here, but I still think of it as an anapestic poem. Beneath in the, because every single line has at least one anapest, it seems, or almost. I guess this one here only had a trochee and iambs, but almost every line has at least one anapest. For an iambic poem, that'd be very unusual. So you could call it an anapestic poem with lots of iambic substitutions. That's how I think of it. But if that doesn't seem right to you, it's fine to call it a mixed anapestic and iambic poem. Either way, it does have quite a few anapests in it. And it would be interesting to look at how those anapests function in the poem. You know, where they happen, the trembling ladder, by the trembling ladder, by the wooden stairs, and the moonlight flowing over all beneath in the churchyard. It seems like the anapests add an extra frisson and extra excitement to the suspense at this point in the poem. So yeah, if you've been scanning this and you're wondering, whoa, there's an awful lot of iambs, what's going on? Is this really anapestic? I hope that will address your issue. And as this list of seed poems is always evolving, I'm always looking for more poems. So if you find other anapestic poems, feel free to send them my way, please, especially contemporary ones. It's not easy to find, but hopefully we will add to this list. Okay. Dream Variations, this beautiful poem by Langston Hughes. Most people would probably say it's in free verse, but it does have a lot of anapests in it. And as I just explained, I was looking very hard to find anapestic poems other than my own. So, you know, I was excited to realize how anapestic this was, but it certainly has a lot of iambs in it as well. Both of these first lines, for example, start with an iamb and then anapest, or maybe you might even say that this one is a Antibachius, it's called Antibachius. You'll see it written out in the list of variations for this meter. In some place of the sun, here's two anapests, to whirl and to dance. Here's another anapest till the white day is done, or maybe critics, you could call those, but either way, triple feet. Then rest at cool evening, this beautiful foot at cool eve. You could put a half wand on cool if you want, or a cup. Evening beneath a tall tree. I love this poem. So beautiful. Yeah, you could call that a Antibachius as well. Tall tree. While night comes on gently, while night comes on gently, a very clear anapest. And then this has this little extra syllable ending. You see that in iambic lines, also in anapestic lines. While night comes on gently, dark like me, that is my dream. So beautiful, dark like me, another critic, this wonderful, mysterious foot. And then that is my dream. So what he's doing here, I would call this line anapestic trimeter, because the first foot is clearly an anapest or a critic, however you want to mark it. A critic would be if you really hear the dark and the me equally, or if you hear dark as half one, you could say it's an anapest with more emphasis on me. Either one is correct. Dark like me. What he's doing here is he's slowing it down and letting us wait and hear the two cups implied. So these would be ghost cups. If they were at the end of a line, we would mark them ghost cups like that. But because they're in the middle of the line, I tend to mark them as what I use the little musical note of rest, and I find that easier to see in the middle of a line. So I'm getting a little rest there. That is my dream. And basically I feel he's turning this middle foot into an anapestic foot with that dash, with that waiting process. Dark like me, ghost cup, ghost cup. That is my dream. So he builds up the suspense. So it's still a trimmer line. Dark like me, that is my dream. So beautiful. So it's kind of climactic to end with the stanza with 3 feet, whereas all the others are 2 feet. Actually, that's not true. Rest at cool evening is also 3 feet, right? Then rest at cool evening. So beneath a tall tree. So it's a 2 foot line, 2 foot line, 2 foot line, 2 foot line, 3 foot line, 2 foot line, 2 foot line, 3 foot line, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3. A really beautiful way of building the beauty and the suspense and having this final climactic line echo this line by being also a trimeter. So then to fling my arms wide. Go back to our scanning. To fling my arms wide in the face of the sun. So that's the same as the others. The other stanza, I am, and then a iambic, sorry, I am Anapest, and then Anapestic Demeter in the next line. Dance, whirl, whirl till the quick day is done. The beautiful Cretic feeling again. Rest at pale evening, a tall, slim tree, night coming tenderly, black like me. So with this beautiful last line, it's only 1 foot, and he's kind of bringing it all to that one Anapest or Cretic foot. It's interesting. It's like moving from the dream, like the dream was all about the trimeter, the 3. And then now instead of the 3, he's brought it back to the 1. Just that one climactic, simple point of self recognition, acceptance, this beautiful moment of transcendent unity with himself. So beautiful. Okay, so moving forward, and I am excited to see what other Anapestic poems will emerge as the spiral continues. This meter was used by a lot of the popular women poets of the day. I believe it's hard to find their poems. I spent a lot of time finding this one, looking through Fanny Osgood's Crumbling Leather book and finding a poem that I thought was a lot of fun. She's using it for humorous purposes. The anapestic meter is very, very strong, very clear. Dost thou see, dost thou feel, O mine idol divine, how I've yielded the soul of my soul for thy shrine? The soul of my soul, excellent, I think. I've yielded the soul of my soul for thy shrine. By the way, Fanny Osgood was a close friend of Edgar Allan Poe and probably a big inspiration for The Raven. She wrote a very similar poem to it. Dost thou thrill to the tones of my melody sweet as it glide to the heart on its musical feet? So you can see this is extremely regular. In its anapestic, there's a couple of iams. Here's an iam right here. And there are occasional moments how my thoughts like young singing birds. So young singing, you might consider that to be a Bacchius, one of those things. So, I think this is one that's pretty straightforward, and you might try scanning it yourself, see what you come up with. If you have any questions, share them with me in the portal called Meter Questions for Annie. I think you'll enjoy this one. And again, Osgood really directly, consciously writing in Anapes and coming straight out of the oral tradition. And she's a very skillful poet. I enjoy her work a lot. Okay, trying to scroll down again here. Okay, this is the first poem in my next book. I won't scan it because I want to keep this video within about a half hour, but again, the meter is pretty straightforward. Maybe I'll scan this one in another separate video another time, but I chose it because I wanted a very powerful invocation for the opening of the book. And then here's from another of my favorite poetesses, Lydia Sigourney. I think this is an absolutely charming poem, and describing these two goddesses meeting together. And Lydia Sigourney is a poet, unbelievably interesting figure in 19th century women poets. She published so many books, poetry and advice for young ladies, and started a school and supported like 8 children or something after her husband died through her poetry. She once said, if there is a kitchen maid in the kitchen of the muses, it's me. Nobody works harder than me. She wrote free poems for anybody who asked. She was an incredibly generous soul, and I would have loved to meet her. And this is her description of these two goddesses meeting together and talking about how they're controlling and running things and what a good job they're doing and taking care of everybody. And it's such a matriarchal poem. I just adore it. Let us walk hand in hand, for no obstacle caring, till the vine or the mountain shall grow. Its suit of green velvet the brown heath be wearing, in deserts with plenty o'erflow. So again, it's a wonderful combination of iambic and anapestic feet. And when she says, but we're the true strength of the land, I just love how she's bringing the anapestic into this with no shame at all, because this was a period where, if you look at a lot of Sigourney's poems, iambic pentameter was the only meter that was respected but in the general literary world, except for somehow Longfellow got away with writing non-iambic meters, but generally, um, if you wanted to look like a serious poet, you wrote iambic, as Longfellow did too, of course. And Sigourney, when she wants to write serious, she writes all this blank verse in iambic, and it's boring. And I love this one much more. And finally, another wonderful combination of anapestic and iambic feet. Tis the gift to be simple, tis the gift to be free. You can see the anapest moving through here as well. And this wonderful poem, which I'm quite sure was written by women. The Shakers were a very female-led group. To be simple, tis the gift to be free. So here's another anapest. Here we have one of those fourth paeans, a very unusual variation again, but here it is. And then a very anapestic feeling in this beautiful and well-known song. If you don't know the tune, do look it up. It's so beautiful. Tis the gift to be simple. Tis the gift to be free. Tis the gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, 'twill be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we will not be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, we come round right. To turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning, we come round right. So to turn, here's a rest here. Turn, turn will be our delight. So the climax is still an Anapest, even though there's iambs here. Till by turning, turning, we come round right. I do love this Anapest here. Till by turning, turning, we come round right. You can really hear the triple energy gathering, and it shows us that the fiery ferocity of the Anapest can also be very gentle, as we saw in the Sarah Teasdale as well, that the power of the will is not always a high energy or dominating power. It can also be a very gentle power, but it still is very, very strong and asserts the life force in a way that maybe if you think of the witch Starhawk, her distinction between power with and power over, I think maybe the Sigourney poem and this poem, and maybe I would think mine as well, are using the Anapest in the sense of power with, not necessarily power over. A kind of a turning into our own power, our own identity, as in the Langston Hughes poem when he finds unity with himself. It's not about power over, it's about power with. It's about claiming our own space for our own will in the world. And I do believe Anapest can help with that. So I hope you enjoyed this. There wasn't time to scan every poem, but you can certainly ask me any questions in Meter Magic Spiral and Meter questions for Annie Thread. Thank you. Bye.